Technology.
I've been wondering where it was.
Me too. Every week it's something. I'm sorry. 2 shakes. There it is. Can you believe this? Okay, there we go. I'm sorry. There. Well, it's upside down. Who cares? In the name of God, who is love, beloved, and love overflowing. Amen. I have a friend who just returned from walking a portion of the Camino. And for those of you who may not remember, the Camino is an ancient pilgrimage route going back to about 800 in the Common Era. And it can begin anywhere from France and ends at the Cathedral of St. James, or Santiago de Compostela, which is in northwest Spain. And it is believed that they have there, in a very beautiful silver box, the remains of the Apostle St. James. It takes approximately a little over a month to walk the complete 500 miles. If you walk a distance of about 15 miles, a little over 15 miles a day. And my friend had a deeply spiritual experience while walking on the Camino, as many people do, even though she only even did just a portion of it. When she got to St. James, the cathedral, she was exhausted and yet still spiritually invigorated. Well, as some of you know, when one goes on a spiritual pilgrimage like this, we often refer to it as a mountaintop experience, similar to Moses going up to Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments, not 15 as Mel Brooks said, but or Jesus going up to the Mount of Transfiguration. As you might imagine, re-entry is a little bit difficult. It's a bit of a rude awakening. After all the peace and quiet, and particularly the camaraderie amongst all the pilgrims, or as they're known on the Camino, peregrinos, it was a difficult adjustment for my friend, because as one walks the Camino, one sees many other pilgrims, and they're all there for their own reasons, usually spiritual, but not necessarily. But whenever they pass each other, they always say, "Buen camino," which means have a great pilgrimage on this walk, this holy walk. And so, as you and I can imagine, there's this camaraderie that starts to form with these total strangers. It's a wonderful feeling, and it really, frankly, doesn't happen in the ordinary, everyday world. In fact, the everyday, ordinary world, people can be quite rude, as we've all seen. There's kind of a general impatience and even sometimes anger lying just beneath the surface for most people, particularly in densely populated areas. In fact, some of us were chatting with our parishioner Scott, who hopped on a cruise today. He's in Miami at the moment, and he was sitting at the airport. His plane got canceled, if you can imagine this. Gee whiz, how shocking. And as he was sitting there, apparently somebody's teenager had an absolute temper tantrum meltdown. So you can imagine how difficult it would be to come back from this blissful experience back to the airport, where all the noise and the news is screaming at you at the top of the volume. So it is pretty common when traveling that this happens at the slightest inconvenience. But all of this is to say that it was a difficult transition for my friend to return from this beautiful mountaintop experience of the Camino to the valley of everyday life. Sometimes it seems that even after centuries of practicing our faith, human beings are still just as impatient as they ever were. So I've thought about this quote from a woman named Dorothy Day, who is considered a saint in the Roman Catholic Church, who began her life as an American journalist, social activist, and even a suffragette. and she helped establish something called the Catholic Worker Movement. And it was basically a pacifist movement that worked to provide aid for the poor and homeless. And she wrote a few books, and here's one from her book. This is a quote from her book, The Reckless Way of Love. I love that title. She said, "Whenever I groan within myself and think how hard it is to keep writing about love in these times of tension and strife, which may at any moment become for us all a time of terror, I think to myself, what else is the world interested in? What else do we all want, each one of us, except to love and be loved in our families, in our work, in all our relationships? God is love. Love casts out fear. Even the most ardent revolutionists seeking to change the world, to overturn the tables of money changers, is trying to make a world where it is easier for people to love, to stand in that relationship to each other. We want with all our hearts to love and be loved, and not just in the family, but to look upon all people as our mothers, sisters, brothers, and children. It is when we love the most intensely and most humanely that we can recognize how tepid is our love for others. The keenness and intensity of love brings with it suffering, of course, but joy too, because it is a foretaste of heaven. It just doesn't seem easy to practice love. I mean, look at the gospel reading for today. Apparently, some religious leaders are criticizing the disciples once again for plucking grains of wheat to eat. Well, it's the Sabbath, and simply because of that religious feast, you want to call it, holiday, simply because of that, Jesus and the disciples are criticized, in spite of the fact that these are hungry people. So once again, Jesus has to differentiate for the religious leaders that religion came into being for humanity, not humanity for religion. Now, he said it about the Sabbath, but you can still interpret it the same way. Religion is a tool that is supposed to help us all grow up and grow in compassion and love, not judgment and condemnation. As one of my clergy colleagues said this week, it seems Jesus is constantly stressing what is good, not what is right. Ooh, that should sound really interesting. Jesus is constantly stressing what is good, not what is right. If you read the New Testament, it seems as though Jesus is continually saying something similar over and over again to people who want other people to obey the letter of some religious law rather than the spirit of it. So it seems to me that Jesus always stresses compassion and love over doctrine and dogma. And it's what continually gets him in trouble. It's not too difficult to see those parallels in our own day, amen? Yeah. We've set today aside to celebrate Pride, the Gay Pride month of June. It's really technically for the whole month, but today we'll remember it. And of course, I have hung a lovely rainbow boa. I was so happy I found a boa that I bought two. So, so we have one just in case. So, but I did this because it's the colors of the pride flag, and each color has a meaning. It's symbolic, right? The red is for life, the orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, the green for nature, blue for harmony, and purple for spirit. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody how difficult it's been historically for adult LGBTQ plus people to receive basic human rights, to just have the choice to choose whom they would love without interference from the government authorities, particularly in our own country, which has supposedly always supported a separation of church and state. The Williams Institute of Law has said that 17% of gay, lesbian, or bisexual adults had attempted suicide during their lifetime, compared to 2.4% of the general population. 17%, 2.4. LGBTQ people were 92% more likely to think about suicide, with 75% more likely to plan suicide and 88% more likely to actually attempt suicide. And believe me, for transgender folks, the statistics are even more grim. So I'm in agreement with Dorothy Day. You know, all anyone ever really wants is to love and be loved. And humanity has failed, particularly when they are of a religious bent. If religions have been teaching the love of God for all these centuries, you think that humanity would have learned to put that teaching into practice, but unfortunately, it ain't necessarily so, as the song goes. Think back for a moment on the AIDS crisis and COVID, and think again about all those LGBT adults who couldn't even make medical decisions for their loved ones because their homophobic families would suddenly show up on the scene, swoop in, and take over with the law on their side, leaving absolutely no legal recourse for their partners. Why have good Christians interfered with medical decisions, never mind inheritance laws, of their LGBT family members, when there is supposed to be a separation of church and state? For that matter, why were so many LGBTQ plus people forced to live double lives just so they could keep their jobs, their children, their basic human rights? And then we wonder why so many young people drop out of church. There doesn't seem to be any proof whatsoever that religion makes anybody any more loving or compassionate than someone who doesn't go to church. I'm waiting for the thunderbolt. And on June 16th, we'll be remembering, unfortunately, another failure of ours. We'll be remembering Juneteenth and how we've used religion through the centuries to hold people back, harm people, kill people. Ugh. Now, thankfully, we have come a long way from the days of being forced to hide one's sexuality or to shop in certain places simply because of the color of your skin. There are still shops that won't make whatever it is they make for people for pride. That's why I don't go to Freeman's anymore. I won't do it. So the stigma and the negative consequences still plague us. In some countries, there's a death penalty just for being gay or lesbian. Think back then to Matthew Shepard, the young boy who was literally crucified at the young age of 21 for no other reason but because he was gay. That was in 1998, folks. That was just the other day, not a long time ago. I may get criticized for having a day set aside in church for pride, but as a mother and a follower of Christ, I can't in good conscience avoid the reality of how difficult it has been for gay and lesbian folks. Still today, if we're going to have integrity as followers of Christ, we too have to be willing to take a little heat and stand up for equal rights, not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for any group of people that's shoved to the margins for religious purposes in this country where church and state are supposed to be separate. There's enough hatred to go around the planet. And so I'm proud to be an Episcopal Christian and proud to be a part of St. Catherine's Episcopal Church, who I hope is now getting to be known in this area as a safe place to come and worship, regardless of whom anybody loves. And if any of you are watching this service, you need a family to love you, we'll do that. I'll be your mama. I'll give you mama hugs. If you need a place to learn about the love of God, whether you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, you are always welcome here. As a woman named Karen Kaiser said recently, I don't want to be a member of an exclusive club, open only to a select few, concerned with rules and laws and who's in and who's out. I want to be a part of a church that lives and breathes belonging, the embodiment of acceptance, our wide expanse of welcome, a holy haven for all the hungry hearts. So Lord, let us be the incarnation of inclusion, a tiny slice of heaven in our little corner of the earth, where all means all means all. Amen.